The dim glow of the crystal bazaar's lanterns cast long, wavering shadows over the labyrinthine stalls as Alara crouched beside the ancient artifact cradled in her hands. The air was thick with the scent of burnt sandalwood and a faint metallic temps that seemed to pulse with hidden energy. Her fingers traced the smooth, cool surface of the shimmering relic, a delicate lattice of crystal veins glowing faintly beneath its translucent shell. Each pulse of light seemed to beat in time with the restless rhythm of her heart. Her breath caught in her throat, a breath she could no longer speak aloud, and a sudden vibration thrummed through the artifact. It was as if the object itself was alive, breathing with a quiet desperation that mirrored her own. Ilara's eyes widened as a whisper, faint and almost imperceptible, curled through the silence inside her mind. It was not her own voice, but something else. A voice both foreign and intimately familiar, echoing within the confines of her thoughts. "Who's there?" she tried to ask, but her lips remained silent. Instead, she reached out with her mind, pushing past the panic that threatened to choke her. The whisper grew clearer, a murmur of ancient words, half-forgotten promises, and a plea woven with shadow and light. Suddenly, the artifact's glow intensified, bathing her face in a spectral radiance. The bazaar around her seemed to fade, the murmurs of commerce and footsteps dimming into a distant hum. Within this suspended moment, Alara glimpsed a form emerging from the crystalline depths, swirling, shifting figure of light and darkness, flickering like a flame caught in a restless wind. The entity's presence was overwhelming, neither wholly benevolent nor cruel. It pulsed with a power that felt both imprisoning and seductive. A silent conversation unfolded between them, a dance of emotions too complex to voice aloud. The entity conveyed its yearning for freedom, its connection to the voice Alara had sacrificed, and the price that freedom would demand. Alara staggered back, the weight of revelation pressing down upon her. This was no mere lost voice. It was a living, breathing essence, bound within the artifact, trapped by the very bargain she had made. She realized, with a sinking heart, that reclaiming her voice was not a simple transaction. It was a dangerous pact with a powerful spirit whose desires might not align with her own. Gathering her courage, Alara sought out the enigmatic merchant once more, weaving through the bazaar's shifting corridors until she found the shadowed stall where he awaited. His eyes gleamed with a knowing light, reflecting the glimmers of the market's magic. "You have discovered the truth," the merchant said, voice smooth and unyielding. "The voice you lost is not lost at all, but held captive by a force older and more cunning than you imagined." Ilara's gaze hardened. "What must I do to get it back?" The merchant's smile was inscrutable. "You must confront the entity, negotiate with Aitor, perhaps fight. But be warned, freedom comes at a price, and the cost is often more than a voice." A cold shiver ran down Ilara's spine as she pondered the gravity of her choice. The bazaar seemed to pulse around her, alive and watchful. Could she trust the entity? Could she survive the ordeal? That night, Alara found herself drawn into a surreal vision within the heart of the bazaar. The world melted away, leaving her alone with the bound entity. It flickered between forms, sometimes pleading, sometimes menacing, its presence a mirror of her own fears and hopes. They communicated wordlessly, a communion of souls where intentions were laid bare and truths unspoken. The entity revealed fragments of its past, the reasons for its imprisonment, and the desperation for release that mirrored Elara's own yearning for her voice. She felt compassion stir in her chest, mingled with the steely resolve that had carried her this far. The choice before her was stark: to risk everything for the chance to reclaim her voice, or to resign herself to silence and the unknown consequences of her bargain. As the first pale fingers of dawn crept over the bazaar, Alara stood alone in its heart, the artifact heavy in her grasp. The fading moonlight cast long shadows that danced like ghosts, whispering of the perilous path ahead. Her hand tightened around the relic. Whatever awaited her negotiation, conflict, or sacrifice, she was ready to face it. The price revealed was daunting, but Alara would not let the silence define her fate. The bazaar held its breath, and so did she. With a final glance at the fading market, Alara stepped forward into the unknown. The weight of her choice heavy but her spirit unbroken. The Crystal Bazaar was no stranger to whispers of rebellion, but until tonight, none had dared to strike a blow so bold, so palpable in its silence. Alara moved with purpose through the shifting corridors of the market, the artifact snug at her side humming faintly, a quiet heartbeat against the chaos. Her voice, still lost to the cruel bargain she had made, was replaced by a steely resolve that radiated from her gaze. Around her, the hidden market pulsed with its usual eerie brilliance. Stalls glittered with forbidden relics and shadowy deals, but tonight, beneath the silver sheen of the moon, something different stirred. Travelers like her, those bound by silence, by lost parts of themselves, gathered in the dim recesses of the bazaar's labyrinth, drawn by Alara's unspoken call. The air was thick with anticipation, a fragile thread of hope weaving between them. Myra, her fiery-haired ally, was the first to meet her in the shadowed alcove, behind a stall, trading in memories bottled like perfume. Their fingers intertwined briefly in a gesture of solidarity before Myra addressed the small group with urgent, silent gestures. Each traveler bore the marks of the bazaar's cruel bargains, missing voices, stolen memories, twisted limbs, but in their eyes burned a shared desire to break free. Alara laid out the plan with a series of sharp nods and drawn symbols in the air, her movements precise. They would disrupt the bazaar's rhythm, challenge the merchant's control by refusing to comply with the usual exchanges. The market, a living entity of magic and will, would not take such defiance lightly. As the group dispersed into the market's labyrinthine paths, the atmosphere thickened. Stalls began to shimmer uncertainly, their edges flickering like candles in a draught. The silent watchers, emissaries of the bazaar's merciless will, emerged from the shadows. Their forms were ghostly, faces blurred as if caught between worlds, and they moved with a predatory silence. The market's magic twisted, warping the very ground beneath Ayalara's feet. Ayalara's heart pounded as she felt the weight of countless unseen eyes. The artifact pulsed, a cool light spreading beneath her cloak. It responded to her need, a tether to strength and power beyond her own. When the first of the silent watchers lunged, Alara stretched out her hand, and a shimmering barrier of translucent energy erupted around her and her allies. The market's magic recoiled, but the barrier held, glowing like a shard of dawn in the endless night. The bazaar convulsed in response, its stalls warping and twisting, illusions shattering into shards of crystal and shadow. The struggle was silent but fierce. Each step Alara took was a defiance against the crushing weight of the market's ancient bargains. The travelers fought with gestures, glances, and the artifact's flickering power, their rebellion a chorus without sound, a dance of shadows and light. Time became a distorted rhythm. The moon traced its slow arc across the sky, and the bazaar's fury grew desperate. Yet, for every stall that crumbled or merchant who turned hostile, more voices joined the silent uprising. Alara, though still voiceless, led with a presence that rallied hope in the darkest corners of the market. As the first pale hues of dawn seeped into the bazaar's edges, the chaotic shifts began to subside. The silent watchers retreated, dissolving into smoke and silence, leaving behind fractured glass and scattered relics. Alara stood amidst the ruins of the market's resistance, breath steady despite the exhaustion that clawed at her limbs. Her eyes scanned the faces of her allies, weary, marked by loss, but alight with a new fire. The rebellion was far from over, but in this moment, a fragile victory was theirs. The Crystal Bazaar, for all its mercurial power, had been challenged. Alara's gaze drifted upward to the pale light of a moon that was fading fast. Somewhere beyond the shadows, her voice waited, lost, but not forgotten. And as the market's magic waned with the coming dawn, she made a silent vow. This was only the beginning. The market would remember, and so would she. The night had shifted. Alara had shifted it with her. But the question that hung between the fading stars was clear. How long could a spark burn in a place built on silence and shadows? The Crystal Bazaar would answer in its own time and in its own way. The moon hung high over the Crystal Bazaar, its pale light filtering through the intricate lattice of shimmering stalls and stalls that seemed woven from starlight itself. Yet beneath this radiant glow, Alara found herself at the threshold of a new and daunting challenge, the Crystal Labyrinth. It was whispered among the few who had glimpsed it that this maze was not merely a physical trial, but a crucible for the spirit. A place where the very fabric of one's will and fears could be tested and unmade. She stepped forward, the ground beneath her feet cool and smooth, as the entrance to the labyrinth opened like a maw of translucent quartz. The walls around her rose up, crystalline facets, catching and fracturing the moonlight into 1,000 dancing rainbows. Each step she took seemed to ripple the light, and the air hummed softly with a latent magic that stirred the hairs on her arms. The labyrinth was alive. Alara's breath, shallow but steady, coiled in little clouds before her lips, silent, yet she felt the weight of her own silence like a stone in her throat. The cursed muteness that had driven her here was both burden and motivator. Each silent step forward echoed with the unspoken pleas of her heart. The path ahead was not fixed. As if sensing her presence, the crystalline corridors shifted and folded in on themselves, refusing to settle. A corridor that had stretched wide and inviting moments before now narrowed into a jagged tunnel, its walls closing in like the clasp of a giant's hand. Reflections swirled on the facets, showing fleeting images, some of herself, others of things she could not quite place. Shadows of faces long forgotten, whispers of laughter and loss. At one turn, Alara found herself trapped within a cage of mirrored crystal. The walls reflected her image back at her. Fractured, multiply, echoed Alara, silent and desperate. Her own expression seemed to mock her, the voicelessness embodied in the staring eyes of her reflections. Panic fluttered briefly in her chest, but she forced herself to breathe, to steady her nerves. The labyrinth was testing her, and she must not falter. A soft, melodic hum began to fill the air, weaving through the corridors like a siren's call. From the shadows of a crystalline alcove emerged the whispering crystal, an entity formed from the very heart of the labyrinth. It shimmered with translucent light, pulsing gently, and its voice was a chorus of whispers that seemed to echo inside Alara's mind rather than her ears. "Why do you seek what was lost?" it asked, its tone both curious and chilling. Though she could not answer aloud, Alara's eyes met the shifting lights within the crystal. She gestured toward her throat, then to the artifact she carried, the shimmering relic she had traded her voice to possess. The whispering crystal's facets flickered with understanding. "Bargains bind more than flesh," it murmured. "To reclaim, one must unravel." But beware, the labyrinth does not yield its secrets lightly. The path ahead twisted and reformed, revealing a puzzle of shifting crystals embedded in the floor and walls. Each piece reflected a fragment of the bazaar's many bargains, some glimmering with hope, others darkened by regret and loss. Alara moved carefully, each step a calculated risk, adjusting the crystals to align the paths of light and shadow. With each successful shift, the labyrinth's grip loosened, the walls pulsing less insistently, the air growing lighter. But with every move, the reflections grew more vivid, more insistent. Pressing her to confront memories she had long buried the moment her voice was stolen, the faces she could no longer call upon for help. Her fingers trembled, not from fear alone, but from the weight of choice. The labyrinth was a mirror to her soul, and to escape, she had to face not only the magic that ensnared her, but the pain she carried within. At last, with a final adjustment, the crystalline maze shuddered and began to dissolve, the walls melting into cascades of moonlight that flowed around her like liquid silver. Alara stepped forward, her heart pounding but her spirit unbroken. Beyond the labyrinth lay the next stage of her perilous journey, the heart of the bazaar itself, where the ultimate bargains were struck, and where her voice awaited its reckoning. Yet even as she moved onward, the labyrinth's lessons lingered, the knowledge that every path could shift, every bargain could change, and only by mastering both the external magic and her own inner resolve could she hope to reclaim what she had lost. The night was far from over, and the crystal bazaar watched with glittering eyes as Alara pressed forward, her silent vow burning brighter than any star. Ilara's footsteps echoed softly against the crystalline floor, the muted sound swallowed by the vast chamber ahead. The walls shimmered with translucent facets, each catching the moonlight that seeped from the bazaar's hidden crevices and fracturing it into a kaleidoscope of pale blues and silvers. At the center stood the merchant, still cloaked in their shifting fabrics, the veil concealing their face like a barrier between worlds. "You seek answers." The merchant's voice was a low murmur, smooth and measured, as if every word was weighed carefully before release. "But know this, knowledge here is as perilous as the bargains you make." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "I've paid a price already. I need to understand what I've gotten myself into. Who are you? What is this place really?" A faint smile played beneath the veil. The merchant raised a slender hand, fingers adorned with rings that caught the fractured light and slowly drew back the veil. The face beneath was both familiar and alien, skin, pale yet luminous, eyes an ethereal shade of silver, deep and ancient as the night sky itself. A faint sorrow lingered in their gaze, an echo of centuries lived in shadow. The chamber pulsed with a subtle energy, the crystals resonating softly like a heartbeat in sync with the bazaar's magic. Alara felt the weight of the moment, the air thick with secrets long buried. "I am called many names," the merchant began, voice now tinged with the weariness of ages. "But you may know me simply as the Keeper. I have watched over this market since its inception, a gathering forged from dreams and desperation, where the impossible is bartered in whispers beneath the moon." Ilara's breath caught. Why? Why the bazaar? Why the bargains? The Keeper's eyes glittered with a mix of pride and regret. Long ago, when the world was still young and magic wild, there was a need, an unspoken yearning in the hearts of those who dared to dream beyond their mortal limits. The bazaar was born from that need, a nexus where desire and consequence entwine. Here, every trade is a thread in a tapestry of fate, each bargain a shift in the balance between light and shadow. The crystals around them shimmered brighter, casting intricate patterns that danced like living stories across the walls. Alara reached out, her fingertips grazing one, feeling a warmth that belied the cold appearance. "And your voice?" she asked quietly. "Is it just another thread in that tapestry?" A shadow crossed the keeper's face. "Your voice, your very essence, was claimed because you sought power without seeing the whole price. Many come here blinded by need, willing to give all for a glimpse of hope. But every gift from the bazaar carries a weight. To reclaim what is lost is to confront not just the magic, but the very nature of your own soul." Alara's mind raced. The merchant's revelation untangled some of the mysteries, yet wove new complexities. The bazaar was no mere market. It was a living entity, bound to the desires and sacrifices of those who entered. "Then what is my path?" she demanded, voice steady despite the storm within. "How do I reclaim what was taken?" The keeper's gaze softened, a flicker of empathy breaking through their eternal composure. "You must walk through the mirrors of your own making, face the reflections of your fears and regrets. Only then can the bonds be broken. But beware, the bazaar does not yield its secrets easily, and the cost may be greater than you imagine." Outside, the moonlight waned, the first hints of dawn threatening to dissolve the magical veil that hid the market from the waking world. Alara squared her shoulders. "Then I have no time to waste." The merchant inclined their head in solemn acknowledgement. "Very well, step forward and face what lies beyond the veil of illusion. Your journey has only just begun." As Alara turned to leave, the chamber's crystals pulsed one last time. A silent accord between the keeper and the traveler who dared to challenge the shifting bargains of the crystal bazaar. The merchant's true face remained etched in her memory, not just a foe, but a guardian of secrets, a keeper of balance in a world where every whisper beneath the moon could change destiny. The path ahead twisted into shadows and light, and Alara knew that with each step, the stakes would rise. Yet with the truth unveiled, her purpose was clearer than ever. The bazaar's magic was formidable, but so was her will. And somewhere in that labyrinth of bargains and illusions, her voice awaited reclaiming. The night deepened, and the first echoes of dawn stirred beyond the crystal walls. Alara's journey into the heart of the bazaar's enigma was far from over. The merchant's true face had been revealed, but the ultimate bargain, the one that would set her free or bind her forever still, loomed in the shadows ahead. With a final glance at the fading moonlight, Alara stepped forward, ready to face the mercurial forces that held her fate in balance. Moonlight filtered through fractured crystal panes, casting fractured shards of silver onto the cold floor beneath Alara's feet. The deeper she ventured into the crystal bazaar's labyrinthine heart, the more the air thickened with a sorrowful weight, a palpable silence humming with unsaid words and unfinished stories. The winding corridors now gave way to a cavernous chamber, its walls adorned with jagged crystals that seemed to absorb the faint light rather than reflect it. Shadows danced, shifting like living things, and from their depths came the faintest of whispers, barely audible yet utterly impossible to ignore. Ilara's breath caught as the whispers grew louder, coalescing into a chorus of silent cries that brushed against her mind like cold fingers. She instinctively pressed her hand to the artifact she carried, a shimmering relic that had cost her voice, and felt its pulse synchronize with the haunting voices. They were not just echoes. They were the remnants of those who had bargained here before, souls trapped within the bazaar's merciless grasp. The chamber's atmosphere thickened, and spectral forms began to materialize from the shadows. These silent echoes were translucent and fragile, their features blurred and shifting as though caught between worlds. Their eyes locked onto Alara with a mixture of pleading and warning. Though they spoke no words, their silent laments filled the space with a profound sadness that settled deep in Alara's chest. She stepped forward cautiously, her gaze scanning each apparition. She could almost hear their memories. Fragments of bargains made in desperation, voices traded for power, limbs for knowledge, time for eternal binding. The weight of their sacrifices hung heavy in the air, a chilling reminder of the bazaar's true cost. Alara's own loss felt suddenly less isolated, part of a greater tapestry of pain woven through the market's cruel magic. Kneeling near the center of the chamber, Alara found an ancient crystalline altar that pulsed with a dark, rhythmic energy. Its facets were etched with symbols older than memory, glowing faintly as if breathing with the bazaar itself. The silent echoes circled it like mournful guardians, their forms flickering in the dim light. The altar was the heart of the bazaar's power, the source that bound the voices and souls trapped within its domain. A cold wind swept through the chamber, carrying with it a voiceless roar that shook the crystals and sent shards tinkling to the floor. Alara's heart pounded as she realized the bazaar entity, the unseen force that governed the market, was aware of her presence. It was a presence felt rather than seen, an oppressive stillness that pressed upon her mind, challenging her resolve. Alara steadied her breathing, clutching the artifact tightly. She thought of the voice she had lost, the desperate bargain she had struck, and the countless others who had suffered similar fates. The silent echoes, silent pleas, had ignited within her a fierce determination. She would not become another lost soul, bound to the bazaar's cruel game. Summoning every ounce of courage, Alara stepped toward the altar, her fingertips brushing the cold crystal surface. The energy surged through her, a tempest of power and pain that threatened to overwhelm her senses. Images flashed before her eyes, faces twisted in regret, bargains sealed with trembling hands, voices silenced forever. But amidst the chaos, a single truth crystallized. Only by confronting the entity and embracing the true cost of her quest could she hope to reclaim her voice and free those trapped alongside her. Her silence was no longer an absence, but a weapon, a shield forged from the echoes of the past. With resolve hardening like steel, Alara prepared herself for the confrontation that would decide not only her fate, but the fate of all who had dared to trade with the crystal Bazaar. The night deepened, shadows lengthened, and the chamber pulsed with anticipation, waiting for the moment when the silent would speak once more. "I will not be silenced," she vowed, her eyes blazing with an unspoken promise. "Not by this place, not by its bargains." As the altar's light flared, the silent echoes gathered closer, their forms shimmering brighter, as if lending her their strength. In the heart of darkness, Alara found a spark of hope, a beacon to guide her through the shifting labyrinth of the bazaar's endless bargains. The echoes in the dark had become her call to action, and with that, the true battle for voice and freedom began.